Okay, here we go. The record button has been pushed. This is Law Enforcement and Me, Ellie and Me. This is Carmen Jones. I am your host. We are, as I always say, raw and unscripted. This actually talks about law enforcement, the community, citizens like myself who are not law enforcement officers, but we want to know what the heck is going on. I have my special guest, one of my best friends, on this recording with me today, and that's Tim Santoro from Las Vegas by way of Cleveland. And we're going to talk about what everybody needs to talk about, and that is your rights when you are encountering law enforcement. So the first thing I want to do is invite Tim in. Hey, Tim, welcome.
Hey, thank you.
I am
Thank you
so glad you
by
are
way of
here.
Cleveland. Thanks for throwing that out there.
I always got to, you got to shout out the hometown. Got to shout out the hometown.
Yeah.
It's funny how we always have these text conversations back and forth, but I think it's time to take some of the text conversation and
Uh-huh.
put it out there on the podcast so that we are all on the same page and can
Okay.
talk about these things and have a better understanding on a verbal setting versus the texting. And of course, our listeners are going to be like, oh, okay, that's interesting because the only reason why they listen is because this is super interesting.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
so let's talk about it. We always talk about how people claim to know their rights.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
have a police interaction, and before the police officer can even tell them the reason why they are being approached, the suspect or whoever it is that the cop is talking to says, "I know my rights."
Oh yeah,
So,
everybody does.
so give me a quick synopsis of what you feel as though a person's rights are.
Sure. To, to preface it really quick, it's funny. I had somebody years ago tell me I was violating their rights. I said, what right am I violating? They go, my Third Amendment, which we won't cover simply because of the fact that it allows you as a landowner to refuse quarter to soldiers um, if the U.S. government wants to put soldiers on your property.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how I infringed on because we haven't had a military conflict in this country since the 1860s. But
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
no. But here's the thing. I, let me preface this. I'm not an attorney.
Hmm.
I don't pretend to be one. And this is just stuff that I've researched and learned over the years, taking constitutional law and the police academy and such, and research that anybody can do, but people don't do. And
Mm-hmm.
we have this document, and it's called the U.S. Constitution, and people don't want to take the time to go ahead and read it. So it's easy to say, I know my rights, but what do you know? Did you take the time to read the Constitution? And I'm not saying be a constitutional scholar, but read the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
You read the directions when you buy new furniture to put it together. Well, the Constitution is effectively the directions to how this country operates.
I get that. I get that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
So,
I'm gonna, you know what? Let's just shoot our shot. I'm gonna go into the First Amendment. Okay.
mhm,
So according to what we have on the document of the Constitution of the United States, the First
mhm,
Amendment says it guarantees the right to freedom of speech,
yes,
religion, press,
yes.
and assembly.
Mhm.
Freedom of speech does not allow for hate speech that incites violence or that is likely to incite lawlessness. It does
Yeah.
not protect against threats. Obscenity related to sexual conduct is not protected.
Mhm.
The government cannot control speech, but it can regulate the time and place. Now, for me, as I'm reading it, I'm like, wait, that's a lot. In those
Yeah.
50 words right there, that's a lot. Give
Yeah.
me a breakdown from the law enforcement side of what the First Amendment is and how, as a citizen, I know exactly what the heck that is.
Sure. So this is one everybody likes to think you can just go around and be Eminem and kind of get it off your chest and say whatever you want without repercussions. Um, you know, give credit to that man because he doesn't care what people think. But at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, yes, you do have freedom of speech, and I think anybody who complains about this country needs to realize there are countries in this world that if you speak negatively about their leaders, you can be
Mm-hmm.
executed.
Mm.
And I'm not political. I don't go one way or the other, but everybody likes to, hate on Donald Trump. But guess what? You live in a country that allows you to talk bad about the man and allows you to not like the man.
Mm-hmm.
That's the freedom of speech. And that's what this document gives you here with this First Amendment. But with that, people don't realize that freedom of speech does not imply to hate speech, or like we said, that incites violence.
Right, right.
Um, you know, you can't go around making racial comments that are gonna set people off, or
Mm-hmm.
you can't make comments about any type of individual or group that's going to go ahead and set them off and lead to violence. That is not protected by your First Amendment.
Right.
So it's people going around, and one guy gets in another guy's face and he gets his teeth knocked out, and then he says, well, hey, I was exercising my First Amendment right. Well,
It's
okay, but nobody said that. There's no law that says it was okay for you to do that.
it sounds like, okay, I have freedom of speech and I can say what I want to say, but there's a caveat to it. So
Hmm.
so a lot of people don't understand. Yes, you do have freedom of speech, but you have
Yeah,
freedom of speech to a point.
correct. You have to use it responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a silly example. I can go buy a whole mess of different weapons and destructive devices. That doesn't mean I can't just go use them frivolously. I can go down to Home Depot and buy a chainsaw. That doesn't mean I can go through the neighborhood chopping up everybody's house.
Right, right.
So, it's like, to use that chainsaw as an example, you use it for its intended productive purposes,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense, so.
And yeah, that's why the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is what it is. Anyway, I
Right.
digress.
Yeah. And I think the important one on there is that the big things, obscenities and
Mm-hmm.
sexual contact or sexual conduct, it's not protected because it's the same thing. It can incite violence or,
Mm-hmm.
obscenity and morals. And finally, the last part is most important, that people don't realize the government can't control what you say, but they can
Mm-hmm.
control where you say it and the time
Right.
and place. So, if people want to hold some type of rally and they want to say something, hey, by all means. I remember this was about maybe 20 years ago. This is back in Cleveland. I remember the KKK wanted to have a rally in downtown Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that, okay, so they can, spew their hate or whatever they want to do. But at that time, that they couldn't be stopped from saying that,
Mm-hmm.
but the city of Cleveland was extremely protective of where this rally was going to happen, how it was going to happen, and so on and so forth. So they controlled that. They didn't infringe on their right to go ahead and go around and hold their rally, but they infringed on the idea of, okay, you want to hold the rally? You're going to do it at this place, at this time, and under these circumstances,
Yeah.
so we know that we can avoid it from turning into a riot.
They tried to do the same thing here in Baltimore about 2 years ago, and they
Mm-hmm.
actually applied for the permit to have their
Mm-hmm.
rally at our convention center. And of
Yeah.
course, they made a big deal out of it, and they went through media, and they went through the local television station saying that this was infringing upon their rights, when
Mm-hmm.
actually it was not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
If you want
funny.
to, yeah, if you want to hate, go hate. I'm not saying it's right, but realize that unfortunately you're going to have to hate at the right time and
Yeah.
place, and you know,
Yeah,
so
because a lot of people hate me and I hate them back. But guess what? I'm not going to talk about them to the point of
yeah,
it's just silly to
yeah,
me. So
yeah,
thank you for that breakdown. I appreciate that. Now we're going to skip a couple of these amendments because a lot of this stuff is common knowledge. But in terms of the
yeah.
law enforcement aspect of things, which is what this is, raw and unscripted, let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about number 4.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Correct.
uh, number 4, it says it protects against illegal search and seizure.
Mm-hmm.
A warrant or consent is required to search a person or their property. However, this does not apply to cursory, I speak English, to cursory searches or inventory searches upon arrest. And the
Right.
key word that they want to make sure that we talk about here is unreasonable.
Yeah.
So protects against illegal search and seizure. A warrant or consent is required.
Right.
It
Right.
brings back so many of the things in my mind about the no knock warrant that a lot of organizations are trying to get rid of, as well as I think I talked to you about. No, I don't think you were on there, but I talked about one time where the one cop just wanted the person to get out of the vehicle without probable cause because he felt as though there was something in this person's car. I might
Mm-hmm.
be off track, but this is what I'm reading as I read that amendment. So break that down for me if you don't mind.
Yeah. So basically, what is that saying is that the the police officer, if they go to your residence, they can't just show up at your residence and enter your residence and start looking through all your stuff.
Hmm.
Now, if you invite them in, then there is what's called, plain view. So if, the police officer comes to your house, you invite them in. They say, we want to talk. You invite them in and you have, a pound of cocaine sitting on your dining room table. Guess what? That's plain view.
Hmm.
You no protections against that, you know, um, that the Fourth Amendment does not protect you from that. But they
Okay.
can't go closed areas or locked areas, or it's also, say you've got that pound of cocaine on your dining room table, but you have it's covered with some type of bed sheet or something. It's bizarre as that is, they can't go in there even if they know it looks off. Can't lift up that bed sheet to look at your pound of cocaine sitting
Because
there.
it's not plain view.
Correct. Yeah, and the same goes for cars. What is in plain view of the car when they do a stop? That's what hems up a lot of people is because you know what? They'll have an open container sitting there, or a firearm sitting there, or drugs sitting there, or
Hmm.
something like that. You hear a lot of the time when you watch a show like OPL or something like that, you'll hear the officers talk about what's called shake.
Hmm.
Shake is the loose little particles that fall off the marijuana when people are, rolling their joints or their blunts or whatever it is, and it gets on their clothes and whatnot. That right there, that's plain view. So if I see that shake on you, that gives me, the knowledge to say, okay, hey, there's marijuana in this car. This person may be under the influence of marijuana. So the Fourth Amendment is not protecting against that. But when you turn on the flip side, it also protects you from having the unreasonable searches where, like I said, they're coming into your house and looking through your stuff or digging through your cars or, a woman's walking out of the store and for no reason, well, open up your purse. Let me see in your purse. If she wants to open the purse, then by all means. But at the same time, um, they can't physically go into the purse and do that. Um, Now the exceptions that are on there are the cursory searches,
Hmm.
and this is where people get upset about is they had the big deals in New York, a few years ago about the stop and frisk.
Hmm.
That's what a cursory search is. You stop somebody, and if you suspect something, you'll do a cursory search on them,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
outer clothing pat search. You're not going in pockets. You're not going in any type of zippers. You're not entering anything. You're feeling on the outside for weapons, only weapons. And what is a weapon? A weapon is something, it's hard. So if you go in there and you feel something soft and squishy in their wallet, or I mean in their pocket, maybe it's money, maybe it could be a bag of dope. But the point
Hmm.
is, I can't justify that soft squishy object is a weapon.
Okay.
Weapon hard, right? So if I'm doing an outer clothing cursory search, I don't I don't need a warrant to do that because I'm searching for weapons. Why? For my safety at that
Gotcha.
time. And here's a lot of people won't like this comment, but I- if you've been doing that job long enough, you can tell if somebody has something.
Hmm.
uh, Intuition is a strong thing. And there's also cues that the average person may not get. There's cues to be able to look at somebody and think, okay, they're carrying a gun because of whatever reason. If their pants, sag in a certain area, because not for nothing, most people who are legally carrying weapons, they don't buy professional level holsters and properly carry a weapon. They stick it in their belt, and then you have, 2 pounds of loose steel kind of just sitting there dragging the pants down.
It's funny you
And
say that because one of the former panel members on Patrol Live said that a lot of times
Mhm.
suspects will actually tell you where their weapon is without verbally telling you where their weapon is. You
Oh,
brought that
100%.
to my brain as you were talking about how that cursory search, they're looking for something hard because of
100%.
that's the weapon. It's interesting that you brought that up. I apologize for interrupting, but go ahead with your thought.
And just like if you see somebody walking around and they keep you watch them for a minute or two and they keep pulling up their pants in a certain area,
Hmm.
that's something else that could lead me to believe maybe they have a weapon, because like I said, if you're carrying a gun, even if you're carrying a gun in a regular holster,
Hmm.
the average belt that you buy at Walmart or wherever you buy clothes is not built to carry a gun. They actually make specific belts that you can wear that support guns, because like I said, a gun is 2 pounds of steel that's
Hmm.
just kind of there somewhere on your waist. It makes unnecessary, bulging in the clothing, and it pulls at the clothing in a certain way, and your average belt is not enough to support that extra weight. So
Hmm.
those are all that maybe the general public aren't aware of, but that the trained officer can look at and say, oh yeah, that guy's got a gun on him. you know.
So,
So
does this Fourth Amendment here fall into the probable cause? So when that police officer pulls me over and you talked about seeing something inside of the vehicle, um,
hmm
or a lot of times when we do watch On Patrol Live, they'll say, "Why do I smell marijuana? When's the last time you smoked?" Does the Fourth Amendment fall into that probable cause search when you're talking about the cursory searches?
correct, yeah. So you're protected from them going in your pockets and so on and so forth. But at the same time, if they do identify that weapon, now all bets are off, and they can go in and they can retrieve that weapon for safety. Now that Fourth Amendment, it has kind of a parlay, and now they can put their hand in there to retrieve that weapon.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Any final thoughts about the Fourth Amendment before we move on?
No, no. I think it's pretty much standard. Just people need to understand that as much as it protects you, there's nothing is 100% blanket protection.
Okay. And that's very true. That's definitely very true. So let's move on. The shortest one out of all of these lovely amendments, we're going to go to the Fifth Amendment.
Yes.
Protects against double jeopardy and self-incrimination. Now, this is going to be super interesting to me because double jeopardy, I've always thought was you cannot be tried for the same crime twice.
Right.
But I think that there's, like I said before, there's a caveat to that because
Mhm.
um, I've seen locally here in Baltimore where a person has been tried for the same crime twice, be it something in
Mhm.
terms of like a jury acquittal, even so far as judges basically saying, you know what, you guys did not come up to the right conclusion. We're gonna,
Yeah.
yeah, and then start it all over again. So can you break down for me protects against double jeopardy and self-incrimination?
Sure, sure. So double jeopardy is, I think nobody knew what double jeopardy was until about the
Until
late
the
'90s.
movie.
Actually came out.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever, up until then, double jeopardy was just something that Alex Trebek, brought
Yes.
to us.
Yes.
Rest in peace, Alex. But yeah, no. So that movie came out, and that really brought to the forefront what Double Jeopardy. And I think as fun as the movie was misleading because they said the whole premise of it was that in the end that like she tells the guy in the end, oh hey, I can't be tried for the same crime twice, so I believe there was a line there. She goes, I could shoot you in the middle of Mardi Gras, because they were in New Orleans.
Mm.
Not true. Why? Because, and I'm sorry if I'm ruining the movie for anybody, but you're about 25 years late. Um, go watch it. But the thing is, she was convicted, tried and convicted of her husband's murder. Come to find out, he faked his death. So, yes, she was tried and convicted of his murder, but that doesn't mean she can go murder him again, because now, when the courts find out that he is indeed alive, that conviction is no longer valid.
Right.
So you're not being tried for the same crime twice. She was tried for a crime that was wrongfully, tried. And in the example that you brought up, maybe there was a mistrial or something like that. So the key is you're tried and convicted.
Hmm.
of the same crime twice. If there's a mistrial, then by all means they can, get a new jury and they can go at that and try again. But it has to be specifically the exact same crime. And what people don't realize is there's very rarely one charge that somebody faces.
Right. Yeah.
If you, and
Very true.
everybody thinks it's always, oh, the maximum charge. Well, no, it's every little charge. You could murder 5 people and then lead the police on a high-speed chase. And guess what? Not only are you going to get hit for the murders and the evading and all that other stuff and the weapons possession, you can also get hit for the speeding laws, for the reckless
Mm-hmm.
driving. You
Mm-hmm.
get hit with every single thing in there, and that's what people don't realize. Um, so when people are being retried, are they being retried for the exact same thing? That's the question that you also have to ask in that.
Right.
So yeah, that double jeopardy is a very over understood premise.
It
And I think a
really
lot of it
is.
does come from that movie that, or the other thing is, and I've heard people believe that, okay, you get caught selling drugs. So you get charged, you get convicted with that, and some time goes on, and then you're out there again, and you're selling the exact same drugs in the exact same corner, and you get arrested. That's not double jeopardy. It's a different instance of the same crime.
Okay.
So you got arrested for selling, cocaine on the street corner. So you got convicted of doing that. Now you're doing it again. That's not double jeopardy. It's you doing the exact same thing again. Even though it's the same crime, it's a new crime.
That's funny because on the other night's on Patrol Live episode, the kid that I said looked like Usher,
Yeah, yeah.
the officer asked him, what's your name? And he said, I have the right to not tell you my name. She said, it doesn't even matter because I already know who you are. And as
Hmm.
soon as she said that, I was like, oh, so he's been down this road before. And now I'm calling it, sorry to say this, but I call BS when he says, oh, I don't have to tell you my name. I have that right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's an asinine thing to say to me, number one. But number two, it just goes to show that when you're talking about double jeopardy, he's done this
Hmm.
before. He's been tried
Yeah,
and convicted before, but he's going
yeah.
back out here and doing the same caca again. So no, that is
Uh-huh.
not double jeopardy. This is a brand new crime, and
Yep.
now we have brand new charges that we have to bring up.
Right. And with that too, I like I had kind of joked, the Freedom of Information Act, or I'm sorry, the Patriot Act, I
Mm,
misspoke, the Patriot Act would disagree with you not having to identify yourself. Everything changed a lot in 2001 where as far as protections go. And, you know,
they
whether
don't.
you want to identify yourself as not, first of all, there is nothing in the U.S. Constitution that says that you are protected against identifying yourself.
Hmm.
You have to carry some form of identification
Hmm.
if you are over the age of 18 when you go out
Hmm.
in public, be it a driver's license or state ID or even a school ID. You have to be identifiable.
Hmm.
You just can't go out there being a mystery person. And guess what? They will figure out who you are.
I just love
You
it
know?
when they tell you, okay, you want to be John Doe, you'll be in the jail
Oh yeah,
until we know who you are. There could be 2 days, 5 days, 10 days. You'll be in
exactly,
jail as a John Doe because you have not identified yourself.
exactly.
And
And
these
like I said,
kids
a lot of that.
they
Yeah.
don't realize that that's something that could really easily play out if they refuse to identify themselves.
Oh no. And a lot of that comes from the Patriot Act. We learned a valuable lesson a long time ago. We need to know who people are and what people are doing in this country
Hmm.
because, we don't need something else to happen right under our noses again. And
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, if you have to give up certain freedoms and certain rights and whatnot so we can be protected, it, it's a very small price to pay. I think people get mad. Well, why do I have to go through the checkpoints at the airport? Why does that old lady have to be searched? Well, guess what? There has been multiple cases of you got an old lady in a wheelchair and somebody will be with her or pay her or coerce her into sitting on top of a gun. So if you say, well, that's not fair that that old lady, who can't walk has to be checked at the airport. Well, no, that is perfectly fair because how do we know that nobody's trying to sneak weapons through using her?
Absolutely. Because
And I had oh, go on.
I'm sorry, before the
Yeah,
shoe
no.
bomber, who would have
Hmm.
thought that a bomb would be in somebody's shoe?
Exactly. Exactly. case in point, I had a situation once to where we were at a store and there was they caught a lady on camera. She took a bottle of Patron off the shelf and then with her daughter went into the restroom. Her daughter was about 6,
Mm-hmm.
and then came out of the restroom and the bottle of Patron is missing.
Mm-hmm.
So the restroom was searched. There was no Patron in it, and lo and behold, there was no Patron on this woman. 99%, the bottle of Patron was on the girl.
Absolutely.
But what is this woman doing? She's using the idea that, okay, you know what? These are two, middle-aged male cops. They're not going to search a little girl, and they're not going to push that. And you know what? I'm sorry. At the end of the day, my partner didn't want to. I don't want to. Nobody wants to search a little girl.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this sick woman used her daughter and for all things, just steal a bottle of booze.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that same thing right there that people are using the innocent people like that, like the little girl, like the old lady in the wheelchair, to do their ill deeds. So
So I am
that
kind of
all.
curious about something else that we spoke about, and I'm sorry about the little girl because I mean, if
Yeah.
I know 6-year-olds, and if you talk politely enough to a 6-year-old, you'll say, "Hey, so what did mommy do when you went into the bathroom?" That 6-year old is probably going to tell you. Um,
Yeah.
but I want to go back on something here, and
Hmm.
I talked about it and I brought it up, and it's only because I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah.
So we're talking about identifying yourself. And in the
Correct.
state of Maryland, they have something that's called a vagabond charge. Now, the
Okay.
vagabond charge, from my understanding when I did the Google search, is that if you don't have any way to identify yourself, you
Yeah.
can get arrested for it, but they can also charge you because they feel as though that you are a part of a crime. And if the reason being that you did not identify yourself is because you were part of a crime, of course the charges come up.
Uh-huh.
So even if you, okay, let me I'm getting ahead of myself.
Uh-huh.
So if I approach you, if I'm law enforcement and I approach you and you tell me my name is Tim, but I don't have any ID with me.
Right.
Me as a police officer, I can actually say to you, you do know it is illegal for you not to have your identification with you, and I can
Hmm.
actually charge you for not having identification. That's a vagabond charge.
Yeah.
Then not only are you charged with that and have to go before the judge for that, but if you are involved in a crime and you fail to identify yourself because of the vagabond, that now doubles the charges that come on you.
Yeah.
I hope I've made sense, but do you know of a law that's similar to that anywhere else? And if you do, how differently is that implemented versus what I just talked about here in Maryland?
In all honesty, I'm not sure, how all the other states would work. I would definitely have to research that,
Hmm.
that when we're done here. Um, but here's the caveat with that. Okay, you would think, oh, a homeless person, and they're limited on resources, but they are more than entitled to go down to the DMV and go ahead and get an ID card to identify themselves. You do not have to have a permanent address,
Hmm.
and they can get identification. So it's kind of that idea that you can't just say, "Oh, I'm homeless. I don't have ID. I don't drive. I don't have a place to live." Well, okay, then that's not an excuse because you could still go and get that ID. And um, they have what's called general delivery, which the post office, you know,
Hmm.
will be a general delivery address for you, basically. You
Okay.
know, so because you can have PO boxes on your
Yeah.
drivers and things like that. So it's not always your actual physical address. So I think that's what people wouldn't realize in that vagabond charge also, that just because it's perceived that you wouldn't have an ID because of your limited means doesn't mean that you shouldn't, and doesn't mean that you can't.
Can a person have a paper copy of their identification and that be considered a legal document?
Yeah, you can, and every jurisdiction is different, and it's a discretion thing. 10, 15 years ago, when we were just starting to get the your car insurance on an app or stuff
Hmm.
like that, you had a lot of agencies and stuff like that that say that's not valid
Yeah.
because it has to be an actual physical insurance card. And that's not a fault of the police or the insurance company. That's a fault of our laws not keeping up with technology. But
Okay.
over the years, that's changed, and it is in some states and some jurisdictions, it's perfectly acceptable. But also at the same time, it's the discretion of the officer. Maybe you don't have your ID on you, which you physically do have to have on you, but
Mm-hmm.
you have a picture of it on your phone for whatever reason. I don't understand why you'd actually have a picture of it, not the actual ID, but to each his own. But but a lot of times the officer, that may be good enough for them. Or you have your car insurance, you can bring it up on an app or on your phone or something like that. That right there, that's also a discretionary thing, and the officer could say, okay, yeah, that's good enough.
It may also
I've
be a
done stop.
situational thing as well. Is this person part of the 7-Eleven crew that goes in and they just like have 10 people robbing 7-Eleven real quick? It's a
Yeah.
discretionary thing, I would think as well.
Yeah, because you know what? I can look at that and say, well, okay, on paper, the law says you have to have, an actual physical thing of your insurance. But if I can get your policy number and the expiration date and see that it is valid,
Mm-hmm.
do I want to press the fact that you don't have a hard copy of it? I already know that you have it and it's valid.
Mm-hmm.
So, it just, how hard do you want to push that? And contrary to what people believe, most cops don't want to go and push every single limit. Why?
Right.
Because it's frivolous and it takes up unnecessary time and it's a pain, you know? So,
It's so funny. I'm listening to you, and I'm not a cop by any means or stretch of the imagination, but I'm listening to you, and I'm like, okay, I know I'm getting off my shift in the next 15 minutes. Do I really want to push this issue of this kid not having an ID card?
exactly. And yeah, and at that time, it's like people want to believe that cops are just on everything and, oh, they blinked wrong. They did this. They sneaked. But in reality, they're human, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, most times they don't want to just hit on everything. That's why a lot of the times people who get stopped for speeding, a good majority of the time, you won't get cited for the actual amount.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're going, 40 in a 25 zone. They may just hit you with 10 over.
Mm-hmm.
Why? It's like it's a little slap on the hand to say, hey, you were doing wrong, but I'm not going to hit you with the full board, because you know what? The average person is good and the average person is moral. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
God knows I can't drive the speed limit to save my life. But at the same time, your officer is going to realize that these are good people out there, and yeah, they make a mistake, so I'm not going to hit them with as much as I need to hit them with. Now, there's other occasions, like if what they do is egregious, then by all means, yeah, you need to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
You know, but yeah.
That's pretty amazing though. Um, Again, I have to always put this in every episode. I do not work for Reels Channel. I do not have any association with On Patrol Live, even though I really want to. Um, but because I am not a cop, because I don't follow law enforcement, the biggest thing for me when I watch that show is I'm actually watching how people perform their job because I want to understand exactly what's going on. Now, um, I'm, my brain is always in a fog. So we talked about these amendments. We talked about the probable cause, and I know what it was. I know what it was. Okay. An old episode of On Patrol Live. I think it took
Mm-hmm.
I think it took place in Pennsylvania. Um, there were several people in the car, and the vehicle was pulled over, and of course, the driver had to identify themselves. So the officer said, I need to identify everyone else in the car. And it
Mm-hmm.
became a huge debate. I don't have to identify myself because I'm not the one driving.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I'm thinking that this is like it's like it's like a science class. Okay, every action has equal and opposite reaction. And I feel as though if you're looking at things in terms of science, the
Yeah.
vehicle the vehicle had is in traffic. So that vehicle did something illegal or something that caused the police officer to pull this car over. that means
hmm
that everyone inside of that vehicle is a part of that investigation. That's
Right.
that's just me thinking about things in terms of how the science of it goes. But here's this
Yeah.
kid arguing the fact I'm not the driver, so why should I identify myself?
Right.
Am I wrong in my thinking, or shouldn't
No,
everybody that's in the vehicle do what the officer says?
yeah, excuse me. No, absolutely. And in a second, I'll bring up a good example why. But I would just like to ask people, why don't you want to identify yourself? What's the big deal?
Mm-hmm.
If you're really not doing anything wrong, what's the big deal of just handing over your driver's license or your ID?
Mm-hmm.
So what? Once again, to bring up at that airport, if I go through the airport and, well, I don't have a gun on me, I don't have a knife on me, I don't have explosives on me, why do I have to go through the checkpoint? Why should TSA trust me? Why should that officer trust anybody? And the example that I said I want to bring up is, I don't know if any of the listeners are familiar with this. This is about, 10 years ago, probably more. There was a gentleman named Warren Jeffs. And Warren Jeffs, yeah. Warren Jeffs was a LDS extremist. And basically, I'll just put it out there, he led a cult.
Yep.
He led a very sadistic cult that was committing a lot of heinous crimes out of Utah. And Warren Jeffs was wanted by every single authority you can imagine, and he ended up escaping, and there was warrants out for him anywhere. Warren Jeffs got stopped
Right
just
there in
north
Nevada.
just north of Las Vegas
Mm-hmm.
on a traffic violation that he was in the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And they were headed north, out of Nevada towards Mesquite, going towards St. George, Utah. And it just so happens that I want to say it was a Nevada Highway Patrol trooper stopped the car, not knowing who was in this car, just for I forget what the violation is, but just a traffic violation. And
Mm-hmm.
come to find out that sitting in the passenger seat is one of the most wanted federal fugitives in the country.
Yep. And I will never
So
forget that day because I was living in Las Vegas at the time,
yeah,
and it came across. I think it came across everywhere. Like it came
yeah.
across CNN and all these other places, and I was like, that was like 20 minutes away from us.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that case, like he might have known him by sight, and I forget the details of how he identified him, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you know that guy sitting in the passenger seat just because he wasn't the driver who
Mm-hmm.
committed the violation? How do we know he's not a federal fugitive
Yeah.
wanted in, all 50 states on extraditable warrants? They don't know, and that's the simple fact of it. They're not mind readers. So if you're honest, what do you have to hide?
It just amazes me when they say that, I don't have to identify myself. I'm not the driver. However, you are in a vehicle that is being lawfully pulled over for a
Yeah.
traffic offense.
Yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
so believe it or not, guess what? You are a part of this whole scenario here. So yes, you do have to identify yourself. And of course, he says,
Right.
"Well, I have my lawyer on the phone." No, you don't.
Okay.
No, you
Yeah.
don't. You have
But
you
it's
have Jethro on the phone with you. Don't play
yeah,
with
yeah.
me.
But it's no different than being at a house party and there's narcotic use going on at the house party.
Mhm.
Well, it's not my house. Okay, but guess what? You're here
Mhm.
while a crime is happening. And whether
Absolutely.
the crime is a broken tail light or the crime is, the presence of narcotics, you are present while a crime is happening.
Mhm.
And that is the officer's job when they show up, to find out who everybody is, because guess what, like I said, they're not mind readers. They don't know when they show up.
And the funny thing about it is that if you are not guilty of the crime, guess what? That cop is going to let you go.
Oh yeah, you're gonna go home.
So so why
Yeah.
why make it a bigger ordeal than it absolutely has to be?
But
Um
yeah, people want to fight, people want to argue, and there was a very good scenario last night's episode that I wanted to touch on. If you saw Chief Taylor in Hayes in Arkansas, he had a gentleman that was dead to rights driving while intoxicated,
mm,
and gave this guy every chance to say, "Hey, what were you drinking? How many drinks did you have?
mhm,
How long was it?" Asking him all these questions, and even said to the guy, look, there's an understanding that if you just took a sip, maybe the breathalyzer is going to pick up the alcohol in your breath
mhm,
and you're not that level of inebriation. And giving this guy every chance, and even to the point where let some time pass for the guy to take the test again, and basically did everything he could in his power to help this man out. Whereas he could have ended that in the first 10 minutes and said to his deputy there, you know what, hook him, take him in.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. He went that extra mile. And the guy was a little non-cooperative and was giving really roundabout answers that made no sense. But at the end of the day, he wasn't just outrightly arguing and being obstinate. So he got worked with, and more than likely, he got locked up, but for a couple hours till maybe that alcohol wore out of his system, and more than likely he walked away. I know the poor guy wanted to go watch the Pacquiao fight, which he probably ended up missing, but at the end of the day, I don't know if he got charged with DUI. I don't know what happened, but more than likely they just let him, let it wear off a little and sent him on his way. And the worst thing that's going to happen to him is he's probably going to pay $300 to get his car out of the pound, but otherwise, he's good.
Shout out to Chief Taylor. He always gives folks the benefit of the doubt. And he will always tell you, you up front with me, I will be honest and upfront with you. If you want to take this from me letting you go to this being a whole thing where you go before the judge, we can take it there too. I have a lot of admiration for that guy, and he's so personable. And I mean, he's like my grandpa. He's just like, hey, we're just gonna have a good old fashioned conversation, and what happens with this conversation depends on you. I love it. So we are getting kind of short on time here. Do you have any final thoughts about this particular broadcast, about the rights and anything else that we may have touched on?
Yeah. Here's the thing. If you're going to go ahead and you're going to use something in your defense, know how to use it and know everything about it. Don't just say, well, I know my rights. Well, if somebody put a piece of paper on you with a constitutional law quiz, are you going to pass that quiz? If you don't pass that quiz, then no, you don't know your rights.
Yeah.
And just saying, oh, I know my rights. Well, like that guy who told me, oh, I know my rights. You're violating my Third Amendment. Well, gee, buddy, obviously you don't know your rights if you think I'm violating an amendment that has nothing to do with the situation that we're in. Cooperation goes so far.
Yeah.
And just working with them goes so far. I knew a cop many years ago who he told me a story. He said he pulled over a gentleman the one time that was swerving on the road and pulled him over, and the man was drunk. So he, did field sobriety test on him. The guy was drunk, and he asked the guy what was going on. And the man literally told him was completely cooperative and said, look, my wife of, X amount of decades just passed, and it was just too much stress. And I went and, had some drinks and made a really stupid decision.
Yep.
And you know what the cop did? They took the gentleman's car. They left it in a public parking lot, and he put the guy in his car and he brought him home and said, go sleep it off, and tomorrow morning go pick up your car. You've already paid enough price losing your wife.
Wow.
And the man was cooperative, and the man was obviously in a bad situation there. So it's like, what's the point of pressing that? But you don't argue, and you see, how far you can get. And people are willing to love you.
That's the humanity that so many people forget when they encounter law enforcement. That there's always a human behind that badge.
Yeah, you're not dealing with RoboCop. You're dealing with people. And the one officer, and I'm sorry, I forget his name, from Louisiana, he made that point last night when they asked him, what do you want people to know? He goes, that we're human.
Mm-hmm.
They have kids, and he just talked about that he just had 2 grandkids born. And these are people that, they go to little kids' birthday parties and they have fun and they play with their kids and they have hobbies and they do stuff. They're humans. They're not robots. They have feelings and emotions. They get mad, they get sad, they get happy, and all that other. And like we talked about on the last episode, and you've mentioned this a couple of times, you don't know what that officer has seen or what he's dealt with. So when you want to sit on the side of the road and you want to argue about him stopping you for the broken tail light and give him all kinds of grief and say, well, don't you have anything better to do? And maybe he just responded to somebody who, or a gang shooting where a little kid got killed,
Yeah.
and he's carrying that with him, and you want to sit there and argue with him over a taillight. You don't know what these people are carrying, and they carry stuff that people don't know about and shouldn't know about. And I'm sorry, you can say, oh, that comes with a job, but the average human or any human is not built to carry that.
Yeah.
You're not, there's no human on the face of this earth is built to carry the things that these men and women see. And to see thing, even firefighters and paramedics, they see things that nobody should ever see.
Yes.
And they have to carry this with them. And you just don't carry it with you that day. You carry it with you for the next 30 years. You carry it with you to the day you die. And you learn to deal with it, but you still carry it with you, and it's a weight that you carry all your life.
That is a great way to end the segment, to end this particular show. As always, Tim Santoro from Las Vegas by way of Cleveland. Yes, I said it again. I always enjoy our conversations, be they text or right here on Law Enforcement and Me.
Mm-hmm.
This is another fantastic episode of Raw and Unscripted. I hope everybody out there listening has learned something. I encourage everyone to just, do like Tim says, do that cursory search about your rights. You don't even have to delve that deep into it, because I don't think any of my listeners are actually lawyers that what's the term I'm looking for? I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I'm about to. They're about to cut me off. So Tim, thank you as always.
Yeah.
Don't forget to look him up on Tactable Security Solutions. You can find him, and he will even answer your questions there. And always, you guys can always hit me up in the comments. Just be respectful of each other. I do not like it when you guys curse at me for stupid reasons.